This is the PW Perspective interview, and I meet with former Attorney General of Virginia, Mr. Stephen Rosenthal, and the director of the Keep 9 Coalition, Mr. Buhler. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. How are you all doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking time to talk and really talk about something that is really important, I think, for people who may not understand what your coalition is doing, and just to dispel any myths or any misconceptions about the hard work that you're doing to keep the pureness of the Supreme Court justice system. And so, Ms. Buhler, I want to start with you, sir, and report to a quote that you have summarized in December back in the Washington Examiner. And you have stated as follows: one party adds 4 judges, 3 judges, the other party adds 3 judges, and the courts lose all respect. Can you expand upon that?
Yeah. Is that directed at me or at Roman?
Oh, to Roman. There was a quote that he had said in the Washington.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me. Yes. That quote actually comes straight from Joe Biden in 2019, when he was asked, "Would you pack the Supreme Court if the court overturned Roe versus Wade?" And he said, "I would not get into court packing," and explained why. If one party packs the court, that opens the door for the other party to pack the court, and then we've lost one of the crown jewels of American democracy, which is an independent Supreme Court. And so it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent. We all want to preserve our constitutional rights. We all want a Supreme Court that isn't a puppet of politicians in Washington. And that's why there's such strong bipartisan support for the Keep 9 Amendment, which just says the Supreme Court of the United States is 9 justices.
Absolutely. And I want to go to this one, Attorney General Rosenthal, that one of the things that, actually, as Roman just stated, there's a lot of support, a lot of grassroots Democratic support for this. I mean, over 200 members of Congress support this. And we just recently were from the commission back in December about why there's so many people who do not support court packing. And so why, even though it was very unpopular when FDR first presented it back in 1937, why do you think there are people who are still pushing for it?
For the amendment, or for not having the amendment?
For having the amendment. There's still some people who are pushing for it. Why do you think that's?
Well, with all the division in America these days, and you've seen it as recently as in the last few years, the problem is that there are those who push for court packing because they don't like the decisions that are coming out of the Supreme Court. Right. And they believe that if they pack the court, they'll get the decisions that they want, which is exactly why we are so strongly supporting the Keep 9 Amendment. We can't have the Supreme Court be a puppet of who's ever in power in the presidency and in the Senate. That would remove all the independence of the court and would have no credibility, and the rule of law would not exist.
Right. And Ramon, I want to go to you on something you talked about that. And when you talk about the support and that the Keep 9 Coalition has received, and you can talk about its bipartisanship and how so many people will come together on both sides of the aisle, because even though we know the framers did not originally intend for the divided political parties, but there is a lot of support here. Can you attest to that?
Yeah. Well, our coalition is truly bipartisan. We have Democrats, Republicans, independents, anti-Trumpers, pro-Trumpers, progressives, liberals, and conservatives. They all have their own reasons for being a part of the coalition. But I think ultimately it's because we want to preserve the rule of law. And the rule of law cannot be preserved if every few years the court is expanded at the whim of the party in power.
Ramon, you want to stay as well, sir?
No, I think it's what's extraordinary is the divide between the overwhelming support that this amendment would have in the public. The polling shows that voters would back it by a more than 3-to-1 margin, 64% in favor, only 17% against, even Democrats, 51% in favor, and only 27% against. But politicians in Washington are still divided along party lines, mostly, about this amendment. We have a coalition of former members of Congress, a coalition of former state attorneys general, which is both of which are very bipartisan. And our goal is to get the message to the elected officials in Washington that this is something that not just people want it, but people demand. And, the history of constitutional reform in this country shows that when people demand a change, usually Washington responds. And that's why we had an amendment that guaranteed women the right to vote. More recently, why we had amendments that imposed term limits on presidents and gave 18-year-olds the right to vote. And we think with enough public engagement, we're going to persuade politicians to adopt the 28th Amendment, the Keep 9 Amendment, which would preserve the independence of the Supreme Court.
I want to go to something that you just talked about, and especially when it comes to the keeping the constitutionality of law. And there have been those, and for those who are supporters of packing the court, and then one of the things that they're concerned about, and I think goes to what you said earlier, Attorney General Rosenthal, that they're concerned about rules and laws that are passed that they may not necessarily like. And we have seen that in some instances where there's a fear, especially now with a largely conservative Supreme Court, when it comes to voting rights and so suppression. What do you say to that?
I think that's the way democracy works. I think, through the ages, you will see major Supreme Court decisions that one party or the other is going to despise, and later those decisions may be modified as the court changes. That's the way democracy works. Do I want to see Roe versus Wade reversed? No, but that is democracy. At one point, Roe versus Wade was decided, and there were a bunch of folks who were happy. It's the pendulum of social mores, who's on the court, and what the public temperature is. So my short answer to your question is that's democracy. It's not democracy when those who don't like the decision simply add more justices to the Supreme Court to try to change it.
Right. Remind you.
I would just add that there's a lot of talk about protecting democracy right now. And there is no more fundamental protection for democracy here in the United States or anywhere in the world than a Supreme Court which is independent of politicians. If a President Biden or a President Trump could pack the Supreme Court by expanding the number of justices, right? A court which had to rule on difficult issues like the court had to rule on in Bush versus Gore 20 years ago would have no credibility. And so if we want to preserve democracy, the first thing we've got to do is preserve an independent Supreme Court. And by design, the court has difficult cases. And as former Attorney General Rosenthal said, people are going to be unhappy about some of those decisions. That's the way the court works. If people weren't going to be unhappy, it'd be easy to resolve them. But the temptation to destroy the institution that protects democracy because you don't like a couple of decisions is the wrong temptation.
With Justice Breyer getting ready to announce his retirement, do you think that a lot of this conversation about, we should begin packing the court now because of some of the people, like I said, with his retirement, some of the people are coming on and what President Biden has stated, what he would like to do you think that could give credence to a rare push, despite the fact that, like you say, 3-1, Democrats say we do not want to have court packing? Do you think it could lend momentum to people once again saying, hey, we should pack the courts?
I think the threat of court packing right now is a different kind than what we saw a year ago. A year ago, there were people who thought they could pack the court right now and get away with it. But because it's pretty clear that there are only 48 Democrats in the Senate who want to get rid of the filibuster, I don't think court packing is going to happen in the next year or two. The danger is that people will think that it's not a threat anymore because some people are not, the advocates are not talking about it as loudly as they used to. The real threat is, if you look at American politics, it looks like the Republicans might win an election in 2022 or 2024, but the pendulum always swings. And the real danger is that the next time a party gets all control of all three branches of government, there is a very, very, very great risk that the temptation of court packing will be too great for them to resist. And so that's why now we need a bipartisan effort to make sure that that option is taken off the table. If you will, court packing is too dangerous a tool to trust politicians in Washington with. And so we ought to take it away and make sure that the independence of the Supreme Court is secure.
Absolutely. And Attorney General Rosenthal, I want to ask you this then, because doesn't historical precedent often support the fact that we should keep 9 justices on the Supreme Court because it has been overall balanced despite who has been in the White House?
Absolutely. I mean, that is the point. It's interesting. There is nothing in the Constitution that sets the numbers of justices of the Supreme Court.
Right.
And historically, when court packing was tried back in the 50s, it went down like a lead balloon also. The public reacted violently to it, as did Congress. So historically, it has been 9 justices for 152 years now.
Right.
Prior to that, there were some back and forth. There were some changes, but for over 150 years, it's been 9 justices, and it has worked well.
How has the messaging, Ramon, I'll phrase this to you, how has messaging in regards to the Keep 9 Coalition been in Washington circles?
Well, it's fascinating because in Washington, the attitude is mostly polarized. Republicans have generally been in favor of it. Democrats have generally, most of them haven't spoken out. A lot of them are skeptical of court packing, but the idea of taking away the power of Congress to do something is not something that normally appeals to members of Congress. Normally, they kind of like to keep their power, even if they don't want to use it right away. But the further you get from Washington, and the further away you get from the influence of politicians in Washington, the more widespread support for this becomes. One of the most exciting grassroots movements that we've watched grow is a group of young people called Progressives for Keep 9. And a lot of these kids were Bernie Sanders supporters, but they understand that an independent Supreme Court protects people across the spectrum. And they heard Bernie Sanders say in the campaign, I wouldn't pack the court because I'm afraid Republicans would do it. And so there are new kids signing up every week to join this effort. And there's another group of kids who are more on the right side of the political spectrum that are doing the same thing. And around the country, there are grassroots activists who are calling their members of Congress and saying, tell us where you stand on the amendment, right? If you're for it, that's fine. If you're against it, that's okay too. Just tell us. Don't be like some politicians and say you don't deserve to know. The public doesn't deserve to know where I stand. And that's what's really exciting. And we hope that this coming year, in elections for Congress in Virginia and all over the country, people will ask their elected representatives, not just are you for or against court packing, but do you think Congress ought to keep this power to pack the court? Or do you think for the safety of the country and the independence of the court, we ought to take it away?
How close are we realistically to seeing the 28th Amendment come to pass?
Well, amendments, I mean, as I said before, amendments take time, right? How long did it take to get the amendment for a woman's right to vote? Presidential term limits happened over a period of about 7 years. We think that this amendment will gain a lot of traction this year, but it'll probably take a couple of election cycles for politicians to understand that if they don't support this amendment, they're going to lose key swing voters and they may lose their elections. And when politicians figure out that they can't win elections and their party can't win a majority, if it's perceived as defending the power of Congress to pack the court, then we'll see, I think, overwhelming support. And we're hoping that that might take place in 2 to 3 years or 3 to 5 years. We don't know. But the goal right now is to let people know that there is a Keep 9 amendment. Most people, if they hear the word Keep 9, they think it's something about a golf club. So we want to make sure that people know that there's a Keep 9 amendment, that it would preserve the independence of the court. And then we're counting on voters to deliver the message to politicians that it needs to be enacted.
Absolutely. And finally, last question for you, Attorney General Rosenthal, is when you talk about the messages Ramon just stated, what is the words that can be expressed to let people know that this is something that we need to all support?
Roman is very good at getting the message out and coming up with ways to do that. We've done a number of op-ed pieces. Roman has had some of the coalition, particularly the young kids, contacting their representatives and senators and demanding answers. One of the biggest problems here, as Roman said, is a lot of congressmen and senators will say that, yeah, they agree in principle with the Keep 9 amendment, but they won't sign on the dotted line and agree to support the amendment. So again, as Roman said, the goal here is to get those folks to actually sign on the dotted line and say we agree with the Keep 9 amendment, instead of simply mailing that, yeah, it's a good amendment. In newspapers, shows like this, we're doing everything we can to get the message out, because again, a lot of folks don't know that there's a Keep 9 amendment out there, even though it's so strongly supported by a number of members of Congress and the public, over 3 to 1 in public polling. So we keep pushing, we keep trying to get the message out, we keep contacting our representatives, and hopefully everything will gel.
And I'd just like to say that if people who are listening to this program want to learn more about the Keep 9 amendment, want to learn more about how they can help, very easy to get in touch with us. You can go to our website, www.keep9.org, or email us at leaders@keep9.org, and we spell the word out. So it's leaders@keep9.org.
All right, wonderful. Former Attorney General Steve Rosenthal and Director of the Keep 9 Coalition, Buhler, thank you all, gentlemen, so much. And we'll make sure to get the word out, and we'll put it to a hashtag and let people know Keep 9 and get the word out to the social media.
Thank you a lot, John.
Jimmy, we're so honored.